Yeah, yeah, it's a Capitals themed kind of day, isn't it? And rightfully so. There's going to be Capitals fans who are happy and fans of other teams who are not. This is a first for a lot of players, and it's a first for a coach. So while I talked about a goalie this morning who was his first Stanley Cup, and a role player who got his first Stanley Cup and kind of played a big role in that, let's discuss Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz, a man who at the age of 55 has now finally got his first Stanley Cup. And I say finally because he came into the league in 1998 with an expansion team, the Nashville Predators. So when you look at the great storylines that are going on in this, hey, Barry Trotz started out with an expansion team too. There's a lot of expansion connections. The worst expansion team in history, the best expansion team in history, and a coach who started off with an expansion team. When you look at the career of Barry Trotz, he's a guy who's got the most out of not very much for most of his career. In Nashville, he got 557 wins, 479 losses, 60 ties, and 100 overtime losses. Now, you combine the overtime losses and the losses, that's a below 500 record. Playoffs, 19 wins and 31 losses. But remember, most of the time he's in Nashville, this is a team that isn't great. They can be good at times. They were a team that didn't spend to the cap. They were a team that was often embroiled in controversy as to whether or not they're going to stay in Nashville. Are they going to move to Hamilton? Where are they? Could they move somewhere else? Like all these distractions and all of these things that were going on, and Barry Trotz is still able to get them to a pretty decent record. Nashville was a team that never really bottomed out. So when we talk about these big rebuilds teams need to do, Nashville never really had it. Even as an expansion team, they were decent. And they built themselves up pretty quickly into a team that, even if they weren't going to win, you knew you got a really hard game from them. And that's because Barry Trotz was coaching them. Trotz was a well-respected coach. And it was funny because when they hired him in their first year, I remember thinking, I don't know who this guy is. I don't know anything about him. I have no idea. And then he's a natural. And he doesn't coach... he doesn't coach to be popular. He coaches to win, is the best way I can put it. So he doesn't mind benching a guy or dropping a guy down the lineup if he doesn't think he's performing very well. And he doesn't care how much money the guy's getting paid. And he doesn't care what the owners think. His concern is, are we going to win? Is this guy helping us win or not? Now, when he was let go by the Nashville Predators in 2013-14, that was the second year in a row that the team missed the playoffs. And I remember at the time thinking, it's not really his fault. And yet, when you look at what the Nashville Predators have done under Peter Laviolette, I don't think you do anything different if you're Nashville. So it's one of those odd places where it's like, man, it sucks they fired him, but they probably got better as a result. They get to the Stanley Cup final themselves last year. Well, Barry Trotz was out in the second round. But this year he wins the Stanley Cup while they're out in the second round. That's how unpredictable the playoffs are. It wasn't very long that he was out of work, let go by David Poile, a GM formerly of the Washington Capitals. See, the connections are there. And Nashville, of course, is the team that got Forsberg from the Capitals, and the GM that made that move was George McPhee. So there's sort of a unholy trinity going on here, and I think I want to just stop delving into it. He's coached 328 games for the Capitals. He is in excellent position to renegotiate his deal this summer. 205 wins, 89 losses, 35 overtime losses. His playoff record with this run now, 36 wins, 27 losses. That's pretty good. That's what a Stanley Cup will do for you. Suddenly, your playoff win-loss record looks pretty darn good. 3 division titles and 1 Stanley Cup. They've won the division in the last 3 years in a row. And what's crazy is he's sitting number 5 now in the wins column, behind Al Arbor with 782, Ken Hitchcock 823. Right now he has 762 wins. So this coming year he could definitely pass Arbor. Hitchcock has retired. So in the next 2 years he can pass Hitchcock as well. Now above that you're getting into Quenneville, who's not going anywhere, and Scotty Bowman, who's so far above everybody else, I can't see anybody ever getting to his record. To me, Scotty Bowman's wins record is right up there with Gretzky's points record, and it's not going anywhere. I can't see anybody catching it. He's only won the Jack Adams once, and that was in 2016. But the big knock on him going into this year's playoffs was that he couldn't do it. He couldn't coach them to the championship. And I remember in the first round when Grubauer wasn't playing particularly well the first couple of games, and then Holtby goes in. All the comments I saw were, "This is why we need to fire Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz needs to be fired because he put Grubauer in the first couple of games." Even though going into the playoffs, I said this in the Braden Holtby video as well, it bears repeating. Grubauer was playing better going into the playoffs, and I thought it was a gutsy move to go with the backup to start the playoffs because the starter wasn't playing particularly well. And then when he made the change, he never looked back. At no point in these playoffs did he toy with the idea of putting in Grubauer. I don't remember a single time that Grubauer warmed up after he was sat on the bench following those first 2 games. Barry Trotz is a guy that I think has the respect of his players. I don't look at him as a guy that I think has ever really lost the room. I know that the Capitals had their struggles in the third quarter of the season this year. They weren't playing necessarily particularly great. But you know what? Honestly, the Capitals, I would be shocked if the Washington Capitals don't lock him up to a long-term deal. I'm talking 5-6 years. We talk all the time about how much money players make and are they really worth it. Trotz is worth it. He went through 4 rounds against 4 pretty good teams. And I know everybody now wants to tag Vegas as, well, they were an expansion team. Okay, but wait. That expansion team knocked out the Kings, who'd won 2 Stanley Cups, the Sharks, who were in the finals 2 years ago, and then went through the Jets, a team that finished number 2 overall in the NHL this year. And the Jets were the team that had knocked out the Nashville Predators, a Stanley Cup finalist from last year, who took Pittsburgh to 6 games, and that was a close series. So it's easy to try to write this off and go, it doesn't matter, they beat an expansion team. But they beat Columbus in the first round after they were down 2-0 because Barry Trotz adjusted. They beat Pittsburgh in 6 and never showed a sign that they were panicking. Then they beat Tampa in 7, even though Tampa had them down and had their foot on their throat. Again, no panic from the Capitals. And then in the finals, Vegas wins the first game, and the Capitals win 4 in a row. That fact that the Washington Capitals had no panic in their game this year, I attribute that to good coaching. And a coach that said, all right, guys, just settle down, relax. Don't worry about it. We're good. Just play your game. We'll be fine. And he was right. So for that reason, I think Barry Trotz, he's now a Hall of Fame coach. And I think he would have been in the Hall anyways. I mean, he's number 5 in wins, and he's coached a ton of games. We're getting into the 1,500 game range that he's coached. And I can't see him not being there. But a Stanley Cup is just the cherry on top. So there you go. I know there were Capitals fans going to the playoffs that were excited to see Barry Trotz potentially fired. To those Capital fans, I say, you must be feeling a little better about it now. And for any of you who still feel that way, I got some bad news for you. He's around for at least the next 2 years. They could bomb out next year, miss the playoffs, and he's still going to be around the year after because he won the Stanley Cup. That wins you some heady space to fix your mistakes. All right, there you go. Barry Trotz, number 5 overall in wins, soon to be number 4, and it couldn't happen to a nicer guy. I've never seen an interview with Barry Trotz where I didn't think what an amazing man he was. He's always been very generous with charity, and I know hockey players, hockey coaches, hockey teams in general are very charitable in their communities, and that's one of the awesome things about hockey. And Barry Trotz is also one of the awesome things about hockey. So there you go. Thank you guys so much for watching. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. I'll talk to you again soon.